Alex is a member of the Red Ink Community Library in Providence. He's a PhD candidate at Brandeis University and a researcher of Soviet and Russian culture. He was in St. Petersburg as recently as March 1st. I'd like to hear Alex. Thank you.
Hey, thanks for inviting me here, and thanks for all of you for coming out. I was asked to talk on the Russian resistance movement because I was in St. Petersburg as far as Tuesday. So when the quote-unquote resistance began, I was there for it. Thanks. But I actually think it's more appropriate to start with the words of our own foreign policy establishment. That is the former ambassador to Russia under the Obama administration, Michael McFaul, who tweeted on March 2nd that there are no more, quote, innocent, quote, neutral Russians anymore. Everyone has to make a choice, support or oppose the war. The only way to end the war is if hundreds of thousands, not just thousands, protest against this senseless war. Putin can't arrest you all. It's sort of funny that people like him can call Putin a dictator, but at the same time not really understand what the full powers of a dictator entail. And McFaul also demonstrates a underlying problem in our political establishment, that is the failure to employ actual experts who understand the regions that they're supposed to be experts in, so that they could, I don't know, maybe avoid something like a war in Ukraine. And as I speak, over 20,000 Russians have been detained, and the number keeps going up every day, every hour, and I'm following it pretty closely. The 20,000 was as of an hour ago. Yet McFaul again on March 1st argued that, quote, Russians need to feel the pain of their passivity and allowing Putin to continue this heinous war. Are you understanding the disconnect here that I'm seeing, right? Banning Russia from the Paralympics, for example, that just happened, closing IKEA stores in Russia, restricting the use of Visa and MasterCard in Russia. These are all things, sanctions, quote unquote, taken recently that don't hurt anybody except for the working class of Russia and Ukraine, ultimately. Putin and Russia's oligarchs aren't even half invested in Russia. The truth is that the majority of their assets are in Western property, they're in foreign bank accounts in Western Europe, and their finances are heavily tied to Western oil and gas companies. So in other words, their assets, their money is pretty safe throughout this whole thing. Yet, according to Washington, this is somehow on the average Russian worker, right? This is the fault of the Russian working class somehow. Yet, on March 4th, the Russian State Duma, under an accelerated procedure, they called it, approved the legalization of disseminating, quote, knowingly false information about the activities of the armed forces of the Russian Federation, and for, quote, discrediting the use of Russian troops. This pretty much amounts to a broad condemnation of protests, and it has put minimum sentences on anybody willing to go out to the street to protest, which is why we're seeing such high numbers of detainments and arrests. The Russian state has banned Facebook, it has banned Twitter, and there's no reason to suspect that it's not going to continue banning other forms of social media. I, for example, as a researcher, I've been locked out of the Russian archive websites now. I can't access those anymore. Luckily, I have friends that can do it for me, so yeah. I was in St. Petersburg when the protest started. I walked through the crowd at Gostiny Dvor, chanting no war with some of the people that were there. And I even got stopped by a police officer there who asked to see my documents. And when he saw I had an American passport, he just told me to get the hell out of here. Probably because he didn't want to fill out the paperwork that would require arresting a foreigner. But I did leave after he said that. Russians, I can't reiterate this enough, Russians do not want war. But they have a good reason to believe that either their state has their hands tied behind their back, or that NATO pressure has offered no other solution but war. And I want to make it abundantly clear that the Russian people are powerless against the punitive force of their own state, and they're even more powerless against the extra punitive force of Western capital. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.